Hello, James here. I gotta show you something recently that is in the news concerning this war, and it's some misinformation, and I'm gonna let him explain it. Then I'm gonna show you another channel.
Israeli Defense Force targets United Nations convoy, killing civilians exiting northern Gaza.
Overnight, the Israeli military has fired more than 750 missiles. The IDF says they're firing every 30 seconds. What does this mean for Gaza? Sheer misery.
How serious would we take the actions being carried out by the Israeli regime in Gaza? That is the question. Iran sent a message to Israel today indicating it does not want further escalation by the Israelis in Gaza. In other words, no ground intervention in Gaza. This is what Iran is indicating. Or, if that happens, Iran will become engaged against the Zionist state. This is how serious this has become. Over the last few days, more than 700 Palestinian children in Gaza have been killed by Israeli forces.
Israel has also issued a warning for the people of Gaza today: leave in 24 hours. Move to the south of Gaza. But it's impossible because all of Gaza is small and cramped. Let me pull up a map for you. This is the Gaza Strip, 41 kilometers long, and
just as they targeted the unborn children of young Ethiopian girls through sterilization, Palestinian children are prime targets for the Israeli regime. Israelis' biggest fear is the birth rate of non-Israelis in a land where they will become a minority in population over time. Therefore, for decades, the Israelis have maimed and killed the young or crippled the birth process as they did with covertly sterilizing Ethiopian girls.
About 12 kilometers wide at its widest point. It is surrounded by Israel, Egypt, and the Mediterranean. 2.3 million people live on the strip. 1 million of them are children.
Now, according to the United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, several vehicles evacuating northern Gaza were hit, killing more than 40 people and injuring more than 150 Palestinians as they are leaving this area because the Western-backed Zionist Israeli government demanded that they leave that area as it is being bombed. Entire blocks, we're talking about apartments, are being destroyed as Joe Biden calls the Palestinians evil. It is not evil to fight back in self-defense against a force that has for decades, this did not just begin, for decades they have forced Palestinians into a prison in Gaza where water, fuel, and food are primarily controlled by the Zionist regime.
This strip has 7 border crossings. 6 are controlled by Israel. 1 of them opens into Egypt. All of them are closed right now. So basically, ordinary Gazans have nowhere to go. And they're being hit by airstrikes every minute.
Even Palestinians coming or leaving Gaza are controlled by the Zionist regime in the north and along the Mediterranean coastline. In the south, the border of Gaza is controlled by Egypt, which for decades, since the 1970s, has been paid billions of dollars by the U.S. government to obey the Zionists, their will, keeping Gaza a living hell for the Palestinians. Essentially, Gaza is a prison, with the Zionist forces attacking vehicles leaving northern Gaza. The United Nations agency indicated it has promoted many people to abandon their evacuation efforts and return home. Armed by the United States primarily, the United Nations indicated heavy Israeli bombardment from the air, from the sea and land have continued almost uninterrupted. The Zionist forces, they force Palestinians to leave their homes, and then they kill them as they leave. Joe Biden and most Americans and European Christian organizations, they support this savage butchery, much like they once supported enslavement and even lynching of blacks here in the United States. They have not changed. They have just transposed it upon the Palestinian people. In fact, the Biden administration has contacted corporate media and told corporate media not to do any reports that call for and using the words restoring calm or an end to the violence and bloodshed or a de-escalation or a ceasefire. These are the demands of Joe Biden, the madman in the White House. The World Health Organization has called the Israeli demand that all hospitals in northern Gaza be evacuated, equivalent to a death sentence. These are the ways and actions of devils, not of any chosen people of God, but of devils whose era, whose time is quickly coming to an end. This is T-West.
Here's how unverified information can change the landscape of a war and pave the way for horrific outcomes. You've likely seen the headlines about 40 babies being beheaded by Hamas fighters in the Kfar Aza village in southern Israel. It's hard to miss. It's everywhere. It's been carried by a number of reputable news outlets, repeated on live TV by powerful political figures, and featured on the front cover of British newspapers. The only problem is, there's so far no proof to the story, but it hasn't stopped a spiraling and dizzying loop of hysteria from dominating the news cycle over the last few days. So how did it spread? And what is it being used to justify? This story was first reported by the Israeli news outlet I-24 on Tuesday. During an on-the-ground report in the kibbutz of Kfar Aza, an Israeli reporter first mentions the incident.
David, it's hard to even explain exactly just the mass casualties that happened right here. In fact, the Israeli military says they still don't have a clear number, but I'm talking to some of the soldiers and they say what they've witnessed as they've been walking through these different houses, these different communities, babies, their heads cut off. That's what they said.
Nicole Zedek later clarified that the claim came from one of the Israeli commanders she spoke to.
We walk door after door, we kill a lot of the terrorists. We're stronger than them, they are aggressive, they are very bad. They cut head of children, cut head of women, but we are stronger than them.
The claim was immediately picked up by other reporters. It was repeated on the front page of the Times newspaper by reporter Anshel Pfeffer, featuring in the headline in quote marks. But in the story itself, there are no quotes that back up the story. Instead, Pfeffer writes some soldiers said there were up to 40 babies' corpses found, and that there were claims that some had their throats cut. But no one is named as having said the quote, and the reporter, despite being on the ground as bodies were being excavated, doesn't claim to have seen this himself. It's also repeated on the front pages of The Independent, Metro, The Telegraph, and The Sun. All of them cite Nicole Zedek's report, but cannot verify it themselves. By Wednesday, questions around the accuracy of the story begin to surface, particularly after a report by Anadolu Agency cites the IDF saying they had not confirmed the allegations. A number of reporters who ran the story then begin to walk it back, saying they were simply repeating what they had heard from soldiers and from the I-24 story. By the evening, the story had changed again, with CNN announcing they had confirmed it with Israeli Prime Minister's office.
We have some really disturbing new information out of Israel. The Israeli Prime Minister's spokesman just confirmed babies and toddlers were found with their heads decapitated.
Now, we had been hearing reports that this had happened, but now we are getting this confirmed directly from the Israeli Prime Minister's office.
But that seemed to have been picked up from an interview between Tal Heinrich, the spokesperson from Benjamin Netanyahu, with LBC, where she cites the same source as the initial story, soldiers on the ground.
When you listed the unconscionable atrocities that took place in that kibbutz, you did say that babies had been decapitated. Can I take that as confirmation then? Because that currently is being reported as reported action. That has actually happened, has it?
Toddlers, babies, I can tell you that they, some of them, heads were cut off. This is what we're hearing from from soldiers on the ground, that yes, they cut off heads. They cut off heads.
Then, on Wednesday evening, the US president repeated the claim during a live broadcast, saying he had seen the pictures himself.
I've been doing this a long time. I never really thought that I would see and have confirmed terrorists beheading children. I never thought I'd ever. Anyway.
That was picked up by almost every US media outlet, who ran the story as having finally been confirmed. Then, the White House retracted the statement, telling media Biden and other US officials have not seen pictures or confirmed such reports independently. The US president's remarks were based on media reports and claims made by Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's spokesperson. An IDF spokesperson then tells Sky News Australia that the story has been verified and cites two sources who spoke to the media.
I can tell you that it's been verified firsthand by a senior official in our coronary service. There's a person, a senior person who was identified on record, I think he was on CBS News, personally testified to the fact that he indeed saw the heads of severed babies. And I know that the Israeli Prime Minister's office has also corroborated the news. I, of course, haven't seen the atrocity myself, but I think those two sources enough.
But when Sky News interviewed two IDF spokespeople on the ground at Kfar Aza, neither of them mentions the claims, despite speaking in detail about the civilian deaths in the village. When Business Insider tried to press the IDF for proof, spokesperson Major Nir Dinar responded, saying the IDF would not investigate the condition of the bodies. Quote, "The war crimes that Hamas committed are obvious to the world and are seen in the world, and I don't need to provide any proof of that, and I'm not going to," Dinar said. "It's disrespectful for the dead." When pressed further, he said the IDF were relying on testimonies from soldiers pointing to the same video originally aired by I-24. Back to square one. Until today, no conclusive official statement has been released by Netanyahu's office, the IDF, or the coroner's office, shutting down the skepticism around the reports once and for all. It is a horrific circular debate unlikely to be resolved soon. But the conduct of the media must be scrutinized because there are real consequences. To be clear, all the reporting from the ground in places like Kfar Aza indicates hundreds of civilians were killed, and the details are gruesome and hard to comprehend. However, there is always a need for accuracy, specifically in times of war. What Hamas is accused of could potentially amount to war crimes, which means there is a procedure in place for collecting evidence, documenting eyewitness testimony, and verifying each and every claim. When this isn't done, it feeds into a cycle of violent escalation, and in the worst times, justifies the horrific collective punishment of civilians we are now witnessing in Gaza by Israel's army.
A siege is appropriate, cutting off power, cutting off water.
Well, I think that Israel does have that right. It is an ongoing situation.
Do you think cutting off food, water and electricity is within international law?
I think that Israel has an absolute right to defend itself against terrorism.
That's not the question I asked.
It is an answer to the question that you've asked, and I think it's an appropriate one at this time.
Hamas is a bunch of animals who deserve to be treated like animals.
Which they know is going to result in a massive reprisal, and a right, justified, completely supported by the West reprisal.
That we are unequivocally in support of the state of Israel as they deal with that threat. And they have the absolute right to defend themselves.
It isn't about semantics, the minute details of what did or didn't happen. It's about how stories like this one are being used to silence the criticism of Israel's response in Gaza. The cutting off of water, electricity, and food to more than 2 million people, the relentless and indiscriminate shelling of entire neighborhoods, infrastructure, border crossings, shelters, school. At least 20 families have been extinguished. Thousands more are farewelling each other and preparing to die, knowing there is no way out. This is what is happening right now. Whenever these realities are put to officials, they rebut them by citing the news reports, the ones that haven't been properly verified, but whose impacts have already dominated this war.
Hundreds of children have died, there's a blockade of fuel.
We actually lost 1,200 people that murdered. We are living close to monsters, to inhuman people. And we are fighting for our home, and we will win.
Are you seriously keep on asking me about Palestinian civilians? What's wrong with you? Have you not seen what happened? We're fighting Nazis.
Israel's army has a history of strategic use of unconfirmed reports. In 2021, during the 10-day bombing raid of Gaza, a number of news organizations, including the New York Times, published a report of a ground invasion of Gaza by Israel, citing an IDF tweet. But that wasn't true. A few hours later, the IDF clarified it had been a miscommunication, but it wasn't. Israeli news reports later described it as a ruse by the IDF to trick Hamas into giving up their positions. And they knew that international media would amplify the statement. Last year, when veteran Palestinian reporter Shadid Abu was killed while covering an Israeli raid on the city of Jenin, IDF accounts published videos of Palestinian militants claiming that they had likely killed her. That report was picked up by international media. It was false. We investigated the incident and concluded, along with other media outlets, that Israeli snipers had killed her, something the IDF later conceded. In Bob Woodward's book, Rage, the American journalist describes an incident from 2017 where Benjamin Netanyahu allegedly shows Donald Trump a video of the Palestinian president Mahmoud Abbas ordering the killing of children. However, after the meeting, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson tells Trump he believes the video was doctored. Just this week, another instance of unverified footage being released and shared by government sources. The video claims to show police interrogation of a Hamas militant admitting to the rape of women and children. On Wednesday, it was published and shared by multiple Israeli government accounts, including by a foreign ministry spokesperson. Then it was deleted, but not before it had spread like wildfire across social media. Despite this repeating pattern, many journalists continue to take information fed by Israeli soldiers as fact, and when these misleading reports become headlines, it allows Israeli officials to shut down public debate about its military protocols, especially those in clear breach of international law. This is how misinformation spreads in times of war. It is how armies and governments can seek to manipulate media to alter public perception. And when journalists don't fulfill their obligations to rigorously fact-check claims before they publish them, it leads to disastrous consequences. Here's an example. In October 1990, a Kuwaiti teenager spoke before US Congress, revealing a horrifying testimony that during Iraq's invasion of Kuwait, she had personally witnessed Iraqi soldiers taking babies out of incubators at hospitals and leaving them to die. The story became headline news. It was corroborated by Amnesty International. It was cited publicly by US President George H.W. Bush and used to rally Congress to support a military intervention against Iraq. The thing is, the story wasn't true. The teenager who spoke in Congress was later identified as Naira al-Sabah, the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador, and that her story was written by a public relations campaign lobbying for military intervention. When the Gulf War did begin, the crippling sanctions imposed on Iraq and the military tactics of US and allied forces were defended by citing these and other reports that highlighted the barbarity of Iraqi soldiers. In February 1991, coalition forces bombed an Iraqi convoy that was retreating from Kuwait near the city of Al-Jahra. Hundreds of vehicles were destroyed, with almost all of the occupants inside killed. For years, this strip of road was known as the Highway of Death. In the lead up to the Second Gulf War, journalists repeated the same mistake, taking the US government's claims of weapons of mass destruction held in Iraq at face value, allowing them to be used as justification for the invasion and occupation of Iraq. Again, as we now know, there was never any evidence. But by the time the truth came to light, more than 1 million Iraqis were dead, more than 5 million children orphaned, and an entire region permanently destabilized. Headlines matter, And in war, the battle over headlines is a fight to control the narrative. Journalists must always hold their head above the fray. It is our job to distinguish fact from fiction, because the words we publish matter. Their impacts cannot simply be retracted. This week is a perfect example of what happens when journalism fails. And as this war drags on, we must hold ourselves to a much higher standard.
Wow. So basically, the president lied, and then he, of course, ain't not gonna apologize and be man up and say, "Hey, we wrong," or whatever. Wow. So basically, he just lied. But it's okay, though. They can lie. That's a shame, man. That you're telling people, and that's kind of demonizing the people who ain't part of that group over there. That's cold-blooded. Yeah, that's really cold-blooded, man. Dang. And I mean, even though people are doing wrong on both sides, whether it's Hamas, but and these other people, but hey, this is wrong on both sides, and nobody want to think about that. So wow. So basically, and of course, the president's not going to apologize. Of the United States is not going to apologize for letting that slip out. So they use it to the press secretary. You know, people overhyping, and really, there's somebody that want to see war, man. And they're not thinking clearly. They're not thinking clearly. They're not getting the facts.
Fact check. Did Hamas behead babies? Let's look at what we know so far about where this claim came from and why some media outlets and the White House have retracted the claim. On Saturday, October 7th, Hamas attacked the kibbutz of Kfar Aza. Members of the media were granted permission on October 10th, 3 days later, by the Israeli army to visit Kfar Aza and witness the aftermath of the Hamas attack. During the visit, a reporter from Israeli news outlet I-24 tweeted saying, "Soldiers told me they believe 40 babies, children, were killed." As the day progressed, the information morphed from at least 40 babies were killed to some were beheaded. On the day, the Israeli army could not confirm beheadings. The very next day, in London, commuters were subjected to this horrifying and unverified headline. On October 11th, many Western media outlets jumped on that claim, quoting the spokesman of Israel's prime minister.
The Israeli prime minister's spokesman just confirmed babies and toddlers were found with their heads decapitated in Kfar Aza.
But many of those same media outlets were forced to walk back their reporting, issuing updates like this one. Israel cannot confirm the specific claim that babies were beheaded in Hamas attack. Later that day, during a press conference, American President Joe Biden claimed he had seen photographs of beheaded babies, saying,
"I never really thought that I would see and have confirmed pictures of terrorists beheading children."
The White House later retracted the statement and published this correction. U.S. official and the president have not seen pictures nor confirmed such reports independently, but the damage had been done. Biden's initial claims were already featured on the front pages of many news outlets and continued to be cited in some quarters as justification for revenge attacks and the collective punishment of civilians in Gaza. Once these claims went viral, other journalists who were on the same visit to Kfar Aza on the 10th of October say, "No one spoke to me about beheadings, let alone beheadings of children, let alone beheadings of 40 children." Another Israeli journalist said, During the tour, we didn't see any evidence of this, and the army spokesperson or commanders also didn't mention any such incidents. Sky News correspondent on the ground also confirms not being able to confirm these claims.
We have not seen the evidence of that. We have asked the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, 3 times to confirm those numbers. They have not yet.
Later, the same journalist that broadcasted the claims of the spokesman of Israel's prime minister posted an apology, saying, "The Israeli government now says today it cannot confirm babies were beheaded. I needed to be more careful with my words, and I am sorry." Hamas has denied claims that its fighters beheaded children, calling them lies. As details continue to emerge from the aftermath of the Kfar Aza attack, the line between facts and misinformation has blurred. Lies and half-truths have been disseminated by officials and mainstream media in what is becoming a propaganda war.
Now, just by hearing that, this would happen in the United States.
Kills 6-year-old Palestinian and seriously injures his mother in Illinois.
This goofball, what did he do?
A man accused of brutally killing a 6-year-old boy and seriously injuring his 32-year-old mother in the unincorporated area of Plainfield, Illinois, is arrested, and he is charged by Will County Sheriff's Office. The mother sent a text message to the boy's father indicating the killer, who is the landlord of the property where they live, that he came to the door and he said, "You Muslims must die." Yes, that is what he said. The killer of the boy is 71-year-old white male Joseph Suzuba, who is Ashkenazim, the old ethnic name before they became Jewish. He stabbed the child and his mother. The boy died. Suzuba targeted the mother and the child because they are Muslim and Palestinian. Triggered by the fighting between the Israelis and the Palestinians, he attacked them with a 7-inch blade serrated knife in their home located at 16200 block of South Lincoln Highway there in Illinois. Fighting off the terrorists, the mother ran into the bathroom while dialing 911. After the police arrived, they found the killer, Joseph Suzuba, sitting outside of the home. The 6-year-old boy had been stabbed 26 times. Imagine that, 26 times. That's hatred. And his 32-year-old mother had been stabbed at least 12 times. The mother is being treated for her wounds, and she is expected to survive. A few days ago, Joe Biden, he lied, saying Palestinians had cut off the heads of babies, inciting some Americans to hatred of Palestinians. This terrorist probably heard or read Biden's words, and he decided to act upon it, to respond with violence. The madman in the White House, Joe Biden, of this killing and attempted killing of the child's mother, Joe Biden stated, "Jill and I were shocked and sickened to learn of the brutal murder of a 6-year-old child and the attempted murder of the child's mother in their home yesterday in Illinois." The words of Joe Biden now, who believes this usurper and this liar. Who believes him? I certainly don't, and I hope you don't. For decades, white settlers, many with the name of Joseph, like this killer, they have terrorized and stolen more and more land from the Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza. It is for this reason that this young Palestinian mother came to the United States seeking. What was she looking for? She was looking for safety from these European killers and thieves, land thieves. Instead, her son was killed by a Zionist right here in the United States of America. Not at all unlike the lynching of blacks for well over 100 years in this country. But killed that 6-year-old child, murdered by this terrorist, and she almost lost her life. The Anti-Defamation League has not been quick to condemn this. Alan Dershowitz would call this terrorist act collateral damage, giving comfort and aid to Zionist killers. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, he indicated that taking the life of a 6-year-old in the name of bigotry is nothing short of evil. Earlier in the week, it was the usurper in the White House, the madman in the White House, Joe Biden. He called the actions of the Palestinians evil, but never once said anything that the Israelis have done or is doing. Has he ever used the term and word evil? He's never done it. But he calls what Palestinians do in the act of self-defense evil. The world rejects Joe Biden's position, a position that aligns with most misguided and some not so misguided Christians here in America, in Europe, and elsewhere in the world. For decades, the European Jewish pretenders have killed tens of thousands of Palestinians with the blessings of most Europeans and of most Americans. If you are one of them, you have blood on your hands. This is T West with Afro Synergy News.
Well, there you have it right there. So, watch, and a lot of people here, my parents and like my mom and different individuals, they'll watch the main news and they'll overlook. They don't do no research. They don't go to the internet or they don't find out something for themselves. And so this goes to show you that that even the mainstream media can make up something. And sometimes you have to go dig and find truth for yourself. Sometimes some news outlet be lying, and that's the proof right there. That is the starch God truth. So there you have it. Now, by him telling a lie, and you think Joe Biden gonna say he's sorry to that woman and child got stabbed? No. Nope. Even though it wasn't their fault, they're not even part of that group is over there. They ain't gonna get nothing. So their lives don't mean nothing over here. Right now we have, and that's gonna really, this gonna be a bad thing, and it's gonna be bad. We're gonna suffer behind this financially. I can tell you that down the road. I believe we're gonna suffer some kind of way, and that's why they don't respect the United States in different places. Because when they see and hear stuff like that, and then get heard, and Al Jazeera goes all over the Arab world and other places, so they're gonna be some people like, dang. So that's why people in Egypt and them other places, they heard it. They heard it. Watch what's gonna happen. So the president of the United States just basically cost them the whole dog a war. Ain't gonna get bloodshed. It's one of these days, man. I'm telling you, they're gonna gang up on America because we don't get Biden out of office. I'm telling you, these people like him. And Israel, wow, all I gotta say is, wow. I mean, I feel bad for the people who have to suffer in between, who got taken hostage, and the people who are from both sides. But this stuff, wow, it's really revealing itself. See, they're showing you one thing, and I know is that. And did you know is that they haven't talked about the Ukraine and Russian war? They took all their mainstream focus off of that and put them right over when Israel got attacked. Wow, to keep it going. All right, then, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, so whenever you listen to the news, make sure you go to the right outlet. Do your research, and hopefully, the mainstream don't try to put social media sites try to come at them because they're telling the truth. And you know what I'm talking about, because that's what they try to tactic do. Because it's the freedom of the press, it's the freedom of speech, and however people allow it, as long as it's to inform people, it's not callings or violence or anything else like the copyright and all that stuff. If they ain't doing it right, then hey, people deserve to know the truth on both sides. There's always two sides to a story. Remember that. Alright then, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoy this video. Share, like, and subscribe. See you on the next video. And be blessed. And maybe somehow the good God Almighty is still going to work all this out. But we got to pray this next election that we get Biden, the administration, out. Take care.